So welcome. We, for those of you that don't know us, are Uspire. We seek to create the finest commercial leaders in the world. And we do that by seeking to provoke you, energizing you through interactive workshops and learning and/or coaching and development, and then hoping that that provocation and energizing transforms the way that you either approach business, do business, or engage with your clients and customers. So that's what we do. That's the nature of our business. And in terms of today, we are going to be doing some of the speaking. I must admit, I haven't put myself up for too many awards of late, but I am today's speaker. I'm the director of consultancy here. And a lot of our consultancy work is around helping people solve problems. I can see some of you that we've been working with that it might be negotiation in terms of some of the cost wins and the price increases that we're currently experiencing. I can see others of you that I'm working with in terms of developing consultative selling. There's also people on here that are part of our coaching and our network. So thank you for joining us. You are now all officially part of our Uspire network. And I encourage you to interact with one another, to use the chat facility if you need to. You should be able to interact and send messages to one another. I love it when people start to create connections beyond just our initial introductions. So I'm going to be using chat. I'm going to be using some visual signals like yes and no and maybe, just to get you to be interacting in this virtual world. So let's kick off with some provocation, I think. Let's start with what are we trying to achieve? So in terms of what we're trying to achieve, I want you to think about you as a brand. I want you to think about you as a brand and what do you say about yourself, your intention, and what do others say about you, the kind of impact. And as we go through today, I want you to think about, is the intention in terms of how I communicate me as a leader, me as an individual, the same message that's being received by the other party? And we talk about the shadow of the leader. It's quite an old expression. What is the shadow that you're casting on your leadership team, the team that you're trying to inspire and engage along that journey? So let's kick off with a little bit of provocation. I'm going to share a little video. Let's bring this up. And I'm going to ask our friend and colleague, Grant LeBoeuf, to just give you a bit of provocation around the branding element, because I'm sure we all use social media. Most of you will be on LinkedIn, I'm sure. So let's just ask Grant just to do a little bit of provocation. And Mark, if I could ask you just to give me a thumbs up that you can hear the sound, that would be great.
Why are people's social media profiles so bad? Let's face it, we know that if someone's going to work with you, there's a good chance that they're going to search for you online and find, for example, your LinkedIn profile, which is written, after all, by you. So why are so many of them written so badly? Why do people put something like, I've been working in insurance for 27 years, instead of writing, I am an insurance expert? Surely the second one comes across much better. And why is it that people will post photos that look like they've come out of a horror scene because there's half an arm hanging over them because they cropped a holiday picture when they were sunning it in Marbella? We all walk around with digital cameras in our pocket all the time. Surely you can take a decent photograph for your LinkedIn profile. You know, we're not all media personalities. If you Google David Beckham, there's a very good chance that most of what's written about him is written by other people and journalists. But when people Google you, chances are 90% of what they find was written by you. If you're the writer, at least make it good. At least roll the dice in your own favour and make sure that it works for you. We all know it's important, so make sure you do it properly and sort your life out. Well, at least your social media. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comment box. And to receive regular marketing updates, hit subscribe.
Lovely stuff. So there's some provocation from our friend and colleague, Grant LeBoeuf. I'm going to leave that provocation with you.
Lovely stuff. Welcome back, everybody. So
we've got all sorts of technology kicking off in the background. Apologies for that. So Grant talks about branding, and I'm talking about a brand. We're going to unpick some of that, and I'm going to get a couple of my colleagues and friends to share some of their thoughts and reflections in terms of brand, how they stand out as a brand, and some of the branding experiences they've gone through with us using a tool called a brand key. I'm going to introduce the brand key later on, and I'm going to drop it into the chat so you can share it and work on it offline. It takes time to develop, and the offer from myself and the rest of the Uspire team is for anybody that wants to come back and review that brand key with us. We're more than happily do that in terms of time online with yourselves. So embrace that as an offer. Reach out to us if you want to then go through the brand key and have it a little bit of personal time and reflection in due course. So Grant talked about sort your media life out. I'm going to talk about branding, and in the pre-invitation that came out that you'll have signed up, I'll have asked you this question. Hopefully you can read this okay. If you had to describe yourself as a car brand, which car brand would you be? I'd like you to drop your answers into chat, please. I'd like you to think about the car brand that you would use to describe yourself, and just drop down what you would be in the chat facility. Have a think. I can see the grey matter now whirring away and people going, a Skoda. Thank you, Brandon. Honda. Great stuff. Some interesting brands coming out here, that's for sure. Alpine and Mercedes, some more German brands, French brands. Interesting. Okay. Fascinating cross section. Now, that's the easy question. The more difficult question is why? Why did you choose that brand to describe yourself? Why did you choose that brand to describe yourself? And I can see Alistair kind of going, smirking on his face. And I can see Torben as well, kind of going, interesting challenge. Maybe Torben, bring yourself off mute, press that space bar, sir. Talk about the brand that you've chosen and why did you choose it?
Yeah, thanks for the space bar tip. That was new to me. I chose a Volvo, and mainly for saying, sort of from an integrity point of view, maybe something safe, something reliable in that sense.
Reliable, safe, love that. Thank you, Torben. What else? Claire and Micah, which cars did you choose? I saw that Peugeot came in for Micah. Claire, what car did you choose and why?
I chose a Tesla, Chester. The reason I chose that was because I think I always try and be innovative. I don't always get it right, and I'm not afraid to lead from the front.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Claire. Micah, how about yourself with a Peugeot?
I'm not sure if I'm going to have a punchy answer, but here we go. I chose Peugeot because it's quite an established brand and it stays quite on top of, tries to keep up with the younger generation and tries to stay a little bit stylishly innovative, but it's quite established. So there you go.
Thank you very much. Great stuff. So some really thoughtful answers there. Quick question for you, those who've got the cameras on. Thumbs up if you own the brand of car that you put in the chat, or thumbs down if you didn't. Thumbs up if you own the brand of car that you, oh, interesting. Okay, so some interesting yeses and nos. I've got Amanda with a thumbs up, just like Greg. One of the reasons I asked that question, the next question, if you said no, the brand of car that you put in the chat, would you like to own it? Would you like to own it if you put your thumbs down, right? So you said, yeah, interesting. Okay, so you don't own it, but you might want to own it in the future. The reason I asked that question is that we surround ourselves with things, goods and services that reflect a lot of our unconscious desires and needs. And therefore, by looking at things like the brands of cars or the clothes that we wear, it helps us start to think about some of the elements of brand you, because we tend to like the things we like, and therefore we surround our things with things that we connect with on a psychological level. And therefore, as we start to move into the brand key, and the brand key will ask you to think about things that are your values and what makes you you, what makes you unique. Have a look at the brands and services that surround you, and they will start to inform you of some of the insight as to why you are what you are versus other people. So have a think about that. Just hold the car brand in the back of your mind. So let's move the focus into a little quiz. I've got a quiz for you. So hopefully you've got a pen and a paper. You don't need to have one if you're in the digital age, of course. Hold the answers to yourself. I'm going to ask you 4 questions to guess who somebody is. So if you're in Trivial Pursuit, this is a sports-based question. And the question starts off with this individual, and I'd like you to think of the individual's name, appeared for Manchester United against Bayern Munich in the Champions League. This individual appeared for Manchester United in the Champions League against Bayern Munich. This same individual beat Michael Schumacher to pole position on the podium of a Formula One event. This same individual beat Michael Schumacher onto the podium. This same person, and this same person does exist, played against Tim Henman at Wimbledon. I can see a few people going, I'm not sure if I know any of these people. This same individual walked on to a cricket ground against Australia to bat for England. Now, can I have a quick show of thumbs? Who knows who this individual is? Thumbs up. Brendan, you've got a good idea. Thumbs down if you don't. Okay, thumbs down if you don't. Okay, so Brendan, conscious you're driving and therefore will remain on mute. I'm just going to show a couple of graphics to show that this person does exist. So this person here is on the pitch for Manchester United. Count the number of players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't remember there being 12 players on a football pitch with Scholes and Roy Keane and Giggs and the likes of. Here he is, the same individual on the Formula One podium when Michael Schumacher won at Silverstone in 2001 or 2003. Here he is again playing tennis at Wimbledon with Tim Henman and then walking off from Headingley representing England as an individual. Does anybody now know who this individual is other than Brendan?
Hi, Chester.
Go for it. Who is it?
I believe it's Carl Power.
It is Carl Power. Carl Power. Greg, you knew that as well. Thank you, Jordan. So Carl Power, the legend that is Carl Power. Some of you will know who Carl Power is, and some of you will still not know who Carl Power is. Carl Power had a sporting fascination that led him to do the things that he did. He had a dream to represent his country, to be at every large sporting occasion he could possibly be at, to wear the jersey, to feel the atmosphere, and yet his athletic ability meant that he couldn't do that. But what Carl had was an incredible ability to have no self-limiting beliefs. He used his innovation and his creativity to make sure that he could appear at some of the largest sporting occasions in the world. Carl Powers probably did more for sporting security and big event security than any single individual in the world. And that's because he managed to infiltrate through the security and get onto pitches wearing this shirt and wearing the atmosphere. So Carl Powers is an incredible character who created quite a stir. But do you know when that was? Greg, do you remember when Carl Powers hit the headlines? Roughly. So
not specifically, but the Man United v Bayern Munich year was 1999, I believe. So turn of the century.
That's right. So the best part of 22 years ago. So give me a thumbs up if you've heard of Carl Powers, even now I've kind of explained who he is. So Ben's giving it a thumbs up. No, so people like Mike are still thumbs down. Quite a few people thumbs down to them. Now that's because he made the headlines in the UK. He made the international headlines before social media were around. And brands are only relevant based on their reach, their audience, their relevance to you, and also their recency. So have a think about you as a brand, your reach, your relevance to the audience, and your recency. So you heard Grant LeBoeuf talk earlier on about your social media profile. How often have you updated that? How often do you keep it fresh? How recent is your updates and your postings? You'll see my colleague Mark Francis waving at you in his wonderful chalet in Switzerland, keeping himself cool from the summer heat. He regularly posts new material based on what's relevant to his audience, things that he enjoys doing, and he links that back up into the work that he does. That's part and parcel of his brand. But Carl Powers has not become and not remained relevant to the audience anymore, mainly because they've fixed social security at the big events, but equally because he is no longer relevant and in front of the media anymore. So an example of somebody that has created a brand and that some of us have heard of and some of us haven't. So let's move this into, let me take my background off 1 second. And let's move this into talking about a brand then. I'm really interested to know what you think a brand is. What is a brand to you? What is a brand to you? And whilst you're thinking about that, drop into chat what you think a brand is and what a brand, I'm going to tell you what a brand isn't whilst you're having to think about it. Just drop it into chat there. So a brand isn't your logo. A brand is not your website. A brand isn't your social media channel either. So interesting, we've got consistency, identity, how someone describes you very much around that description piece here. That's great, I love that. A mark of quality. It's a shortcut for quality. Great stuff. Status and identity. Great stuff. Thank you very much for all of those. So yes, it's an emotion. It's an emotion that's received by your audience. So it's not what you do, it's not the intention that you broadcast. A brand is actually the experience that is received, so the impact that your intention receives. Now, do you know whether or not the brand that you broadcast is the same that you want and is received? That's a key question in terms of the brand key tool that we're going to come on and look at. And therefore, I want you to think about the power of a name. So let's take the example of Oprah. Let's take the example from Oprah. Very memorable, very distinctive. What would you say Oprah's meaning is? How meaningful is Oprah? And maybe come to somebody like Susie, because I can see you in my field of view, Susie, and then maybe Phil. In terms of talking about Oprah, how meaningful, how memorable, and how distinctive is she, Susie? And then I'm going to come to this part and look about ownable, flexible, and likable when I come to Phil. So Susie, thinking about Oprah as a brand and a name, how distinctive, how memorable is she?
I think she's, my personal opinion is, I think she's very memorable, just because she can be a bit controversial. She can do the interviews and things in terms of others won't do. Meaningful, I'm not sure about. I'm not confident on that one. But yeah, definitely impactful and memorable to me.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Then Phil, coming to the second part in terms of what's in a name, how ownable is that name for her? How she innovated over time to remain relevant to her audience, and how likable is she? Likable is quite subjective, of course.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's pretty subjective, isn't it? I guess ownable. She was huge personality, not only in the US but around the world. Yeah. Flexible, seems to be able to talk to anyone, as Susie was just saying, and flex her style to talk to senior politicians or just the average Joe in the street, or royalty or whatever. Likable, again, hugely subjective. And I think that's maybe we're going to touch on this, but that's one of my views on a brand, actually, that particularly a personal brand, does it always have to be likable? Does it have to resonate with everyone? Because perhaps it doesn't. To be a strong brand, perhaps it resonates in a negative way with some people. So I'm not
well
sure likable is particularly relevant, but yeah.
I love asking Phil questions like that. He's such a reflective character. He goes way beyond the thought process that I would normally. So thank you for sharing that, Phil, because exactly, you don't maybe need to be likable to be a brand, but it's whether or not people choose to buy into you. And as Chris Voss, the hostage negotiator, says in Never Split the Difference, he talks about being 2.5 more times to make an emotional connection when you can create some form of emotional connection. So likable, maybe unlikable, at least you've made an emotional connection with that name. So what we're going to do in terms of bringing this to life is, in business, just like in leadership, you're going to have a strategy, you might have a development plan, and you're going to think about how you promote yourself, the kind of ways that you're going to communicate it. Is the impact and intention what you want? And how do you know that? What feedback mechanics are you experiencing to work out whether or not you've been successful in terms of delivering against your plan? And therefore, I'm going to give you the brand key later to build your plan. And then you need to think about Grant LeBoeuf's provocation in terms of how do you market and what is the media that you choose to use? And is the impact received the same as the intention that you set out to achieve? So I'm going to leave you with that little provocation, and I'm going to move it into another quick question for you. How would you describe yourself as a leader? Have a think about this. How would you describe yourself as a leader? Back to cars. Would you describe yourself as kind of a driven leader, maybe high octane in a fairly specialized part of the marketplace? Would you describe yourself as a utility leader, flexible, adaptable to the situation? Or would you describe yourself as maybe alternative, maybe cutting edge? Maybe you lead with new ideas, different styles of leadership. Maybe your leadership style, and you describe yourself as more of an explorer, you're a risk taker, you're prepared to go places that other leaders have not taken their teams before, the road less challenged, for example. Or maybe you're more of a flamboyant leader, you like to stand out, and you're prepared to be different where everybody else seems to want to fit into the mix. Hopefully you're not feeling too tired as a leader. Hopefully you're not feeling too dilapidated and too beaten up as you come through that. And maybe you've decided that as part and parcel of your self-development, you want to reinvigorate your brand. And that's what a lot of car brands do. They reinvigorate the brand. So Brendan talked about Skoda as the brand of choice for him. 20, 30, 40 years ago, Skoda was not a popular brand across the European marketplace. So thinking about yourself as a leader, thinking about yourself as a brand, what do you stand for? Now, you might think that branding is just a marketing exercise, but this is how people can start marketing themselves too. I'm going to share a brief interview I had with a friend of mine called Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd, for those of you beyond the UK marketplace, is a TV presenter. He's a breakfast host. And Ben talks very much about his experience as an individual, branding himself in the public eye. And what I'd like you to do as we go through this session is I'd like you to think about, what do you hear Ben say that connects with you? So he's going to talk on a number of different areas and topics, some of which you'll connect with and some of it you might not. But I want you to think about that. And as we go in, feel free to drop what's connecting with you into the chat, because I'm sure other peers and colleagues will have that connection too. So I'm going to share this video and start it, and it'll run for about 2 minutes or so.
And that from where you start to where you want to be is you have to be more strategic about it. I've worked that out over the years, and it got to the point where the decisions that we were making and that I was making with my agent and my family as to jobs that I was doing and how I was being seen was a little bit scattergun initially. And if we wanted to be we wanted to work out where I want to be, if we wanted to create, and I think you mentioned this, if you want to create a vision as to where you want to end up, that will help you guide your path to get there. I did some interesting brand planning with my sister and her husband. They have a company that did a similar thing to what you're doing here, Chester, and it was fascinating because one of the great ideas that they had that they presented me with was my niece, who was a little baby at the time, sitting on a bench, and there was a plaque at the top of the bench. I mean, how many people sit on the bench overlooking a beautiful view, and there's a little plaque saying, this bench is in memory of Chester Robinson. He was a passionate, excitable, charismatic person, and he will be sorely missed, or something like that. And the idea was, what do I want that plaque to say when eventually I have finished my career, when I've retired? What do I want people to remember me as? And if you can work out what you want that plaque to say, then you can start plotting a course to get there. And through sort of exploration with them and going out to consumers and sort of doing lots of focus groups about me and what I do, I was able to work out all these things you've talked about. What are my values? What do I stand for? What is my strategic difference between other competitors? Who are my competitors? Now, of course, the competitors for me change because I can move into a different environment. At 2010, I went from doing the breakfast to going into Sky Sports. And so that environment changed dramatically for me. Understanding I could make that move was really important, though, and that viewers would accept me in that environment. Because often you will see someone getting a job doing something on television and the viewers instinctively don't like it. They don't feel comfortable with that person. They don't feel like they fit. But when you know that there is already a reception to that, and I knew that actually people perceived me as somebody who loved their sport, was knowledgeable about sport, I could make that transition comfortably, and then enjoyed sort of 9 years working for Sky Sports before I then came back to breakfast TV as well. So I think it's been understanding that I am a brand in my own right. Obviously, I'm still me, but understanding that there is a brand that I have to be true to and authentic with as well, I think is absolutely key. Because if much as I would love to do Love Island, Chester, as you and I have discussed at length for probably far too long, I don't think that would necessarily sit particularly well with my brand. I wouldn't necessarily work for my consumers, and that would jar, and that could end up doing some damage. And protecting the brand and protecting sort of what it is that I do professionally is something that I take very seriously, and we plan very carefully.
That's fascinating, because it sounds like you started out on this journey that you were meandering around, and then as the agent then actually took you through a structured process for a guy that likes pictures, that must have been quite a painful process, I should imagine. But
yeah, I undoubtedly that all that, me, I'm certainly not about detail. I'm about sort of seeing sort of what it is that if you can explain to me why I need to get somewhere, then I can get it and I can grab it. I undoubtedly have ADHD and I have various other issues that have allowed me to do what I do and have given me various opportunities, but sort of understanding and focusing on detail has never been a good one for me. So going through a process like that was hugely, hugely important, and allowing me to get to where I am today. And it's something that you're constantly working on as well. It's not something that you just settle on and then it stays there. You're constantly adjusting it, looking at it and making sure you're staying true to that sort of path. And that authenticity is hugely important as well.
I'm hoping that people are kind of taking notes, because that's that concept of how do I reflect what I'm hearing back on myself as an individual, and how am I going to turn up in front of my teams, in front of my organizations. Ben?
So conscious that we could listen to my friend talk for quite a long time, and he's a fascinating individual to talk to. Thank you for those of you that chosen to drop things into chat. I'm keen to hear a little bit more from you as a group in terms of what you connected with there, what you connected a little bit more with. So Ben, are you able to come off mute, Ben, or are you still struggling? Are you still doing thumbs up, thumbs down? It looks like you're all right. What did you connect with listening to Ben speak there?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things for me. One, it's that almost determine where you want to go. So what do you want to be? Have that vision and that plan to get there. Then that's kind of really important, that it's your plan rather than kind of influenced by other people. And the other piece for me was it needs to feel right. So he talked about the Sky job and the sports and almost doing a role that he enjoyed because of his hobbies, but actually much more about being authentic. So the style he brings needs to sit comfortably. I think they're kind of really important things. If you're not in your own skin, then it's an uncomfortable place to be.
And I'm going to share my final video in a bit. Will be Sean Smith, the sales director of Bird's Eye Food, part of Nomad. And he talks about that authenticity and getting comfortable with authenticity and being comfortable in his own skin. Massively powerful for us, because we come into business and there's still that little child within us that thinks maybe I can't do it. And gnaws away like a little chimp on your shoulder, giving you that kind of that imposter syndrome, as they like to call it, pushing you to say, well, maybe you should be somebody else, wear a mask and a veil. So we'll come on and just listen to that as a final piece of video. We're keen to hear Felicity. Felicity, I don't know if you are able to come off mute. You might well be in a medical environment, so you might not be able to do that. You talked about a North Star. Tell us more about a North Star. What does that mean to you, and where did that connection come with what you heard Ben say?
Apologies, I've got a rather heavy cold, so I probably sound a bit weird, but that's what resonated with me listening to Ben just then from your interview, is that you need to know what you're aiming for and try not to get lost too much in the in the weeds of things. You need to know what's guiding you and what you're ultimately aiming for. And I think, and also what he said, that's not always a fixed point. You need to reevaluate and reconsider and always sort of go back to that as being the what's driving you forward, essentially. And obviously I picked that up, or that something that I've always thought about, but using it in that term is something that I picked up from a previous Uspire event that I came to up in London.
Yeah.
When we had the speakers there, and that really resonated with me. And every day I think about that, actually, because I think it's a really powerful way of putting it. And you hear other leaders when they talk about leadership roles that they're in, they talk about this. Well, what is that? What are you heading for? What are you aiming for? What is all your effort taking you towards? And having that North Star is a really nice way of kind of keeping your mind focused.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. And that's that piece around brand you. What do you stand for? What are you moving towards? What are your goals and ambitions? Branding, how are you communicating that every time you impact your team or the people that you're trying to inspire? That might be a change journey that you're on. It might be a category management project. It might be a change management project. It might be a project management piece of work, all of which is how are you communicating your leadership style, and what does it do, and how does it impact individuals? Great stuff. Thank you. So I'm loving to see all of the chat coming in there. So deeply reflective group. Thank you. So what is the brand key then? Let's just talk about that. I'm going to use my toy behind me. So let's look at the brand key. So in terms of a brand key, I'm going to drop into the chat the tool for you to be able to download. But in essence, there's a foundation to the brand key. And above the foundation is then bits about what you offer the teams that you're trying to inspire and change. And then above that is, what do people value about your offer? And it's all about building up so that you get right in the sweet spot, this target here, which is called your brand essence, your brand essence. So let me just share a couple of slides. I don't do many PowerPoints, but sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is the brand key model. It comes from FMCG, CPG, or fast moving consumer goods marketing. And I'm going to show you an example of Dove soap in a minute as to how it brings that to life. So this is the bit about you at the bottom, your strengths, who you're competing against, who you're seeking to inspire, and how you might need to communicate with them. That's about you and your style, about you understanding you as a leader. Your offer is what you bring to the party and what makes you different to other people. Why should people buy into you? Now, some of you might be thinking about future interviews, for example. This is about selling your value proposition to the other side, and in return, wanting to understand their value proposition, because there's a two-way exchange that goes on at that. The value piece at the top then is about the things that are important to you, that you bring to an organization, and the reasons to believe in you. If you can distill that down into a really tight essence, it's about a concise sentence that you could use potentially as an elevator pitch, but maybe it's about you introducing yourself and what you stand for. So let's see it as an example. And I'm conscious this is soap. This isn't a human being. So this is Dove. We all know of the brand, I'm hoping, because it is a global brand. And they have built from strong roots up in terms of they know who their target audience is, they know who they're competing against, and they know what their key pain point is that they are trying to solve for. They then create belief and unique selling points, which is the way that they create offer to consumers, and then their value is around the way that they express that in terms of their brand personality. You can see all their advertising is very clean, it's fresh, moist and supple skin, and even the imagery of moisturizer, a liquid being poured into the soap. And therefore the reasons to believe there are various proof points there. So I'm going to drop the tool now into the chat facility so that you've got that to download. So let me do that and give you the quick activity. What you'll have to do is you'll have to click on it once it uploads and save it to your computer. So that's now dropped into the chat facility. Brendan, you are obviously in the car, so I'll let you do that later. I'll send it to you by email. But the brand key itself is a version of this with the questions. There's 2 pages. One I've just shown you with dark type, and the second is a page for you to write on, either digitally or with a pen. So you can write over the template and start to create it. And I'm more than happy to work with you and your teams to bring that to life over a period of time, should you choose. So you connect with us if you want some coaching, some feedback to develop your key in more depth. What we don't have time for today is to start writing the brand key. It's going to take a bit of time, and it's the kind of thing that you might want to come back to a couple of times. And if you remember that kind of intent and impact, you might need to go off and get some feedback from your team. And therefore, what I thought would be a more powerful use of your time is to share an interview with Sean Smith. And Sean talks about how he has gone ahead of you and done this and the value that it's unlocked for him, rather than me say this is a really useful tool. Let's listen to a leader talk. And I'm going to set it up from about 2.5 minutes in, just so that you don't have to listen to all the setup.
And you, having used the personal branding exercise, having used the brand key probably about a year ago now, I think it was, that we were together. What kind of impact has it had on you?
It's genuinely, Chester, it's been immense. And I think from my initial skepticism about the idea of branding myself, I remember sort of being invited to the session, and I probably didn't articulate this, but I was a bit skeptical about the idea of brand Sean, if you like. But it's been hugely helpful. It's been hugely helpful in just helping me better understand myself, getting comfortable with who I am. And it was interesting to certainly listen to the 3 speakers before talk, particularly Ivan, because it was this exercise that really made me think about my style, my values, and how I showed up. So I initially obviously completed the exercise a few months after the integration, my transition from a small business, as I alluded to at the outset, into this much larger business. And I probably had a period of time where I was very anxious about who I needed to be in this sort of in this new world, and huge amount of anxiety about, would I need to change? And I guess I was consciously always wondering for those first sort of few months of the transition about, would I need to become more corporate? Would I need to become a bit of a robot who's obsessed by process? And would I need to hold my personality back, or would I need to shoe shuffle a little bit under the boardroom table, rather than be my usual straightforward talking self? But ultimately, I guess, would I need to be somebody that I wasn't to fit in this much bigger business? I'd gone from working in a business where it was entrepreneurial. We turned over around 80 million, to a business that was turning over 2 billion. And it was a concern for me, I think, if I'm brutally open. And when I did the work on my brand key, it genuinely was one of the most seminal moments in my professional career, because it allowed me to really take control and embrace who I am, and think about, what do I bring to the party, and what makes me different. And my wife tells me I'm different all of the time, but more importantly, how could I bring my values and my beliefs and my personality into sort of how I lead in this much bigger organization? So without doubt, Chester, it did really have a big impact on sort of how I turn up.
that inner child, isn't it? We've all got that inner child that kind of, you know, sometimes just keeping it at bay, giving, you know, some people call it the inner chimp, kind of just gnawing away at us, giving us that self-doubt, that potential imposter syndrome that people talk about. How do you hold that and keep that in check? And definitely what I've heard you talk about is the tool has helped you just structure some of your thinking to go about that. How did the tool then help you with your leadership style?
I can't begin to tell you just how valuable it was in helping me sort of get comfortable and then develop my style, particularly over the last year or so. This tool, it was my, you know, for those that are familiar with Alan Partridge, it was my aha moment, you know, the moment where I realized who I was. I then began to become much more conscious about leading as me, and not in the style of somebody who I thought that I needed to be. So I became really comfortable with that, and without doubt, I've consciously then developed my leadership style, focusing on, you know, the heart of that brand key, and what it is that I really do and what I bring to the party. And no longer do I feel the need to be somebody else, and I'm comfortable. I'm increasingly comfortable with who I am, and I'm proud of what I stand for. So, you know, when I did the exercise, I identified probably 4 things that, you know, may sound cliche, but it's facts that I stand for. And, you know, those 4 things. So the first thing is authenticity, and leading without trying to be that other person. You know, the second thing is linked, really, is always being straightforward. For those that can probably pick an accent out, I'm from Yorkshire, and you know, my father wouldn't have it any other way. We're straightforward talking folk, and so I've remained true to that. And the other thing is, you know, I've always tried to demonstrate drive and encourage others to drive too as well, and supporting them. But I suppose ultimately, Chester, my brand essence, it's about always being true to myself, and without getting too deep into, I guess, what that means to me, I guess it's being comfortable with embracing sort of all aspects of who I am, and being comfortable expressing my voice. And I've learned it's okay to speak up, to be open, to share when I'm not okay too, actually. And more importantly, I've seen real value over the last year in demonstrating vulnerability in the way I lead, both professionally but also personally as well. So look, I think in 2019-20, I took my mask off consciously and decided I was going to bring my whole self to the table. I was not going to try to be somebody else. And as a result of that, and other tools as well, so I've spent a lot more time trying to sort of really understand who I am, what my values are, what my preferences are, what my blind spots are as well. And the upshot of all of that is, I feel that personally I've just become a better leader and a better operator, and the results have flowed from that, the how, if you like.
And I guess that was going to be the nature of my next question, really, was, you know, it's fine for you. You've taken that mask off and they've seen the whole you turn up. What impact has it had on the business and probably your team at the same time? Yeah,
I think this is, for me, the personal branding exercise had benefits initially, obviously, for myself, but I do think it goes much further than that. For my business, we've widely embraced sort of concepts of personal branding. Whether that's been as conscious as we could or not is probably a discussion point. But I'm lucky to work alongside a board that really encourages individuality and people being authentic. And you know, when Nomad bought the business that I was in alongside another business they bought, we in essence had to create a new culture for the new sort of business of scale. And we've done that by really embracing people's difference and encouraging people to sort of bring their own essence to the party. And as a result of that, that's definitely sort of got the most out of people and people's strengths across the board. So that would be the impact at a business level. And over the last 4 years, the business has doubled in size. So without a doubt, that's played a massive part in that.
So I'm going to stop it there. I'm just conscious of people's time and energy levels in terms of watching videos. Thank you for those of you that shared in the chat there. I'm really interested to speak to somebody like Amanda and to speak to Jordan in terms of just what did you relate to the most? What did you relate to the most in terms of listening to Sean speaking? I'll let you work out who wants to answer first, really. Amanda, you might need a bit of time to reflect on that. Jordan, I know you're a bit more of an off-the-cuff kind of guy. What did you relate to?
Is that my brand then, Chester, off the cuff, shoot from the hip?
Feedback's a gift.
I guess what the chap was saying is being authentic. Being your authentic self is important to achieve what he wants to deliver, both probably personally and professionally. You can't deliver your brand if you're not true to yourself. And I'm pretty sure it was the CEO of Edwards who actually said, I can't remember if it was in a conversation with myself or somebody else, but somebody asked him, how do you separate your brand at work and in your personal life? And he just said, I'm authentic 24/7, 24 hours a day. So,
because it's exhausting. It's exhausting if you're not. If you're trying to be somebody else, it's exhausting because you're constantly investing energy in trying to be that. But this tool is just about helping you articulate, well, what do I want to be? How do I want to be? And then the idea of personal branding and the way that you communicate that is far simpler. Amanda, where are you? What are you connecting with? What are you relating to? Just share some of your headline thoughts, and then I might pivot to Greg just to give us a summary of his thoughts as well.
Yeah, so when you were talking, I was very much thinking about accepting who you are. It's almost like, oh, this is how I am, but this is not what people expect from me, and I have a high expectation of myself, more likely than what they have, but trying to be that and not necessarily being authentic as such, or thinking that actually the way I am is also fine and could actually be better than what the expectation might be as well. So that's what I really liked from his experience and how it helped him developing himself as a leader. So I'm really inspired to do this now and start working through that key. And I know Ben is here as well, so I can work with him on that as well, which I think is great.
That's great. I mean, what I love is the fact that you're saying, actually, I'm going to take away. I think now I've listened to a couple of people, it's worth my time just to give it a go, because some of the easiest and simplest tools can be the most effective. And I know that some of you have been working with the tools and techniques that Mark and myself have been introducing to you in different guises. So, Greg, just give us put a tail on in terms of your personal reflections, and then I'll just pivot into the end of this session.
Thanks, Chester. They're very, very similar to what's came before, to be honest. But the authenticity bit, that definitely comes through loud and clear. A few other things that maybe we haven't heard before. Just it was interesting to hear it. It sounds like when the chap there was at the start of his kind of journey in the new role, there was definitely some vulnerability and doubts there, which is quite brave to admit and resonates with me, and also comes back to the authenticity point. And then I think it was really just, it's almost like as you get a bit more comfortable and maybe the role, you focus much more on the strengths than you do the weaknesses, because ultimately it's those strengths that's put you in that position and not the weaknesses that undoubtedly everyone has. So yeah, that's just what I took out of it and jotted down.
Lovely stuff. Thanks for that. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Jordan, as well for being put on the spot. So I'm conscious of people's time. What we do in the workshop when we expand this is we get people to actually spend time together, both working on the brand key and reflecting. And then we take it a stage further into thinking about your own brand and own leadership style in terms of products and services. This is the tool that we use. I'm not going to show you anything more of that. It's just a little kind of teaser to say that there is much more that sits behind this personal branding exercise, along with things like Ben's bench, that legacy bench. What do you want people to say about you when you've gone? So there's that in terms of what we can also offer. And then I just wanted to invite you to engage with us. Engage with us in any shape or form that you choose. Join an event. The next one like this is September the 16th with Amanda talking about Style Flex as a leader. There's an event, a leadership event going to be in London called our Agility Code. How do you remain agile as an organization? If you want to connect with us, either come through to me directly or connect with Joanna. There's lots of more information and resource on our website. And if you're interested in presenting with impact and the way that you deliver and the way that you come across, there's also some online learn in your own time that you could tap into as well. So a little bit of a cheeky self-promote in terms of some of the other stuff that we provide. Chris will be in touch in due course, but I just wanted to leave you with this particular slide. Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. You don't merely want to be considered as the best of the best. You want to be the only one that does what you can do. So I'll leave that with you and leave you with a final slide in terms of what it is that we can help you do and achieve. So thank you very much for interacting with us. Thank you very much for sharing your conversations in chat. Chris has dropped in an invitation to the next event if you'd like to sign up. I hope you've got some stuff out of today. Give me a quick thumbs up if you're in a good place as a result of today's workshop. Thank you very much, everybody that's got their cameras on. I wish you a great afternoon or a great evening or a great rest of the day, depending on wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, bye.